let's just go ahead and get started. Do you guys just want to go through these one by one? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So the size and sound of Wagner's orchestra. What do we remember about Wagner?
He was large, he was egotistical.
Exactly, and that personality transferred to his music. So his music was equally big, bombastic. So his orchestras were very large. They had a full sound, as you could expect with a large orchestra. And it was very colorful. Again, with all of the instruments that he employed, he was able to just get this large, colorful sound with a lot of tones. So, name Wagner's librettist for The Ring Cycle. Does anybody remember who wrote it?
He was German.
He was German. In fact, he was very close to Wagner.
So,
He was Wagner himself
Oh.
wrote the libretto. Yes. Does anybody remember what it was based on? Nordic folklore?
Like the Lord of the Rings kind of person.
A little bit. Isn't that kind of funny? I know, I always think the same thing. I always think of Lord of the Rings. But if you ever want any more information about the Ring Cycle, it's a huge production, and it's referenced very often in cartoons. There's a Bugs Bunny cartoon that has to do with the Ring Cycle, and so if you ever want to know more about that in a fun way, then just let me know. I can send you that. So what's the connection between Wagner and Bayreuth, Germany?
Where they built his opera house.
Yep, that's where they built the opera house. So because this orchestra, this production was so large, they actually had to build an opera house just for this production. So, moving on, there's two operas by Puccini that display elements of exoticism. So exoticism is using musical ideas from other cultures. Does anybody remember what those two opera were? One's Madame Butterfly, and that one is set in Japan.
what's it called?
Madame Butterfly. And the one set in China, I'm going to spell it for you. Tourandot. It is set in China. Again, moving on. What is the soul of Verdi's opera? The voice, exactly. Expressive vocal melodies. Even though they had these beautiful melodies being sung, the subject matter was kind of questionable and did gain some criticism. Does anybody remember some of the subjects that were talked about that his opera were kind of a little scandalous?
You see the weirdo that put little kids up there naked?
Different productions are done differently. That may have been the case. In one of his opera, Rigoletto, it seemed to condone rape and suicide. So you don't need to know so much that it was Rigoletto, but you do need to know that those were the subjects of scandal. And then La Traviata glorified a free love idea, which also gained criticism. So those three subject matters are rape, suicide, and free love. What is the system of transmitting non-Western music from one generation to another.
Oral tradition.
Oral traditions. So it's most often transmitted orally, usually from a parent to a child in the case of like songs. We hear the same thing. If you think, especially at this time of year, we're singing a lot of Christmas carols, you probably didn't read those carols in a book, you probably learned them from your parents. They are also taught from teacher to student. The compositions and performance techniques are either learned by imitation, so we see that nowadays too, a teacher will play something and have the student imitate it, or also by rote. So the teacher will play something and the student will have to write it down or imitate it or learn it that way, just by listening to their teacher play it. All right. So the ways that they transmit music: orally, imitation, and by rote. What are the scales used in non-Western music? So they're not even really they're not even really a traditional scale as we know it. We know a scale is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But the way that other cultures understand them is a little bit different. So it's not the same how we do it with like there's a specific way that we organize our scales. They don't do it the same way. They use a variety of scales, and yes, you're correct in saying that they are sometimes based off of 5, 6, and 7 tones. That's correct.
So the answer is 5, 6, and 7 tones?
I would put on there that I would just understand that it's a variety of scales, and some include 5, 6, and 7 tones. The way that we organize it is we pretty much have major and forms of minor. They're using a lot different scales. What is the importance of drums in non-Western society?
They're sacred.
They are. They're sacred, sometimes magical. What do they symbolize?
Power and royalty.
Power and royalty. How are they regarded in the culture?
Everybody's.
Yep, they belong to everyone. They're not just one person's. Who was the leading scholar of the folk music of Hungary? Bartók. Béla Bartók. How do you spell his last name? Bartók? Bartok.
X on the ground.
Yep, there's an accent on the O. What were some of the unusual instrumental and harmonic techniques used in the 20th century, specifically in the strings percussion? Prepared piano. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that was definitely one way. What about string players specifically? What were they doing with their bow?
You turn it over.
They did. They flipped it around so that they weren't actually using the strings of the bow, but they were using the back of the bow and hitting it against the strings, and that kind of created a more percussive sound.
Is there like a specific name for that technique, or?
I'm not a string player. I'm not sure. I know that typically in 20th century music, if that kind of a technique is desired, they will make it known to the instrumentalist, and so they'll either write out that instruction or they'll use a term. I feel like there is a musical term for that, I just don't know what it is. So, string players, if you really want to know what the actual term is, ask Laura. She's actually a string player. Let's see. So what about the harmonic techniques? What was kind of the point of all this?
Dissonance.
Dissonance. More important importantly, dissonance not resolving into consonance. And so in that way, it kind of freed dissonance. I mean, the whole idea of dissonance going to consonance had been around for a long time. You'd have this buildup of tension that was then resolved. And that was part of Western music generally. But now all of a sudden you had a lot of tension not being resolved in a traditional way. Along that same road, these tonic dominant relationships in their place in Western music. So we heard that a lot. It's kind of that, it's how like every single song ends. There's a dominant moving to a tonic. It's 5-1. Play for you real quick. So this would be the dominant. It kind of has this pull. And when you combine more chords to it, there's the way that the music sounds and the way that it moves, the way that it goes. It has this kind of gravitational pull. And so it was extremely important in Western music. We hear it still today. It's still very, very important. So, basically what you need to know about tonic-dominant relationships is that the dominant chord has tones that lead into and resolve in the tonic chord. And you need to know that this gravitational pull and resolution of dissonance was extremely important in Western music. The key part of that is that resolution took place. So we had some new scales that were invented and borrowed for 20th century compositions. 12 tone, yep. There was also, go ahead.
Pentatonic.
Pentatonic,
And the whole tone.
Whole tone, yep.
Atonal.
Atonal, not really so much a scale as a technique.
Is it 12 bar blues? Or is that?
No, because 12 bar blues, they're a series of chords. Yeah. That's a chord progression rather than a scale.
So 12 tone pentatonic modes?
Whole tone.
Whole tone, yep.
Oh yeah.
Whole tones. Also, church modes were being used again. This kind of bringing it back. And then, of course, composers were also borrowing scales from non-Western cultures, those 5, 6, and 7 tone scales that we were talking about earlier. They're also inventing entirely new scales. Who was the composer who first wrote a significant atonal piece? Schoenberg. Everybody say it, Schoenberg. Schoenberg, yep.
How do you spell that? Schoenberg.
Where is the birthplace of Impressionism?
Yes.
France in the 19th century, yep, specifically Paris, but really you just need to know France. Who was the most important impressionistic composer?
Debussy.
Debussy. Although what's interesting is he actually hated being called an impressionist composer. He did not like that term. But he's still known for it. Why? What were some of the elements of his music and impressionist music?
Stress of tone, color, atmosphere, and fluidity.
Yep, that's exactly it. Tone, color, fluidity, and atmosphere. They were less concerned with having program music like Wagner, and they were less concerned with telling a story with their music, and instead they were trying to get kind of a feel for something. So one of the pieces, I think it's Lamar by Debussy, it's the C. And so it kind of creates a mood for what that would have been like. Let's see. Who was the most influential teacher of musical composition in the 20th century?
Nadia Bollinger.
Boulanger. Everybody say it. Boulanger. Boulanger.
Means baker.
All right. So moving on, what are some elements of neoclassicism? It's another style in this time.
Emotional restraint, balance, and clarity.
Can you say those again?
Emotional restraint, balance, and clarity.
Yep. That's true. We also had a combination of these old structures and forms from the classical period. If you guys remember the very strict structure of the classical period, you know, a Haydn symphony has a form. Mozart symphonies have a form that they follow.
In my notes, it said classical and baroque. Is that right?
Usually classical, probably late Baroque more than anything else. Probably not the early Baroque that's kind of going everywhere, because that didn't really have a form. But late Baroque started to kind of gain a structure and a form, and that really came to fruition in the classical period, and so we see a return to that. And we also see, we have those old structures and forms combined with new rhythms and harmonies. And so, you know, we're still trying to be modern and still trying to be new about this, but we also kind of wanted to get back to the structured form that we were at beforehand. All right. Does everybody remember which ballet caused a riot?
Rite of Spring.
Rite of Spring. Who was it written by?
Stravinsky.
Stravinsky. Mm-hmm.
In Paris of 1913.
Yes, ma'am. You came prepared. So let's see. So here's what my notes say about it. A riot erupted in the audience. Spectators were shocked and outraged by its pagan, primitive, harsh dissonance, percussiveness, and pounding rhythms. So if you think about it, these people were used to pretty music. They were used to this, you know, going to the ballet and having a really lovely time. And all of a sudden you have this really in-your-face ballet. And it, you know, if you've ever been in a stressful situation or have listened to really tense, angry music, it's just like, oh my gosh, you get anxious. So that's exactly what happened.
Wasn't it that the ballet people were also naked?
Yeah, this guy was
It's
just
pretty scantily clad.
That's probably why they were throwing pillows.
So, I mean, if you think about it, though, where the ballet was set, when it was set, kind of makes sense. But still, Stravinsky definitely pushed a boundary there. All right, so the Rite of Spring is an example of what style of composition?
Primitivism.
Primitivism?
Yeah.
Primitivism? Yep.
Do we need to know what that means or like what that is, or just say
It's a simplification.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say. It'll probably be a multiple choice question in which you just circle primitivism. But in case you do need to know it, let's go ahead and go over it. So it featured harsh dissonances. So dissonance, percussive orchestration, rapidly changing meters, offbeat accents, and ostinatos. So those all contribute to that style. It doesn't say say that you're gonna need to define it, but it's a good idea to still know what it
Yeah.
means. All right. Who was Schoenberg's teacher?
He was.
Yeah, largely self-taught, influenced by other people, but it'd be okay to say that he's his own teacher.
So, wait, sorry. La Sacre, the Sacre du Printemps was primitivism?
The second
Oh, okay.
contact.
I said Red Spring. Never mind.
So they're the same thing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, Red Spring is primitivism?
Yes.
So related?
It's just French.
Mhm.
The sacre is the right.
Oh,
So
okay.
it directly translates to, what is it, the sacred,
It's like the sacred act.
exactly, the sacred act of the spring.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
for the listeners, you need to know it in French.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that's fine. That's a really great question. So just to clarify for everyone then, La Sacre du Printemps is the rite of spring. I wish I was better at French. Okay. So we were talking about 12 tone scales before. What are some elements of the 12 tone system?
The tone rose set receives.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So there's those. Those are how it's structured, though. What specifically was the goal of 12-tone music?
Was it to give equal importance to each?
Yep. That was exactly it. So there were certain notes that were kind of avoided, or they were favored more than others. I mean, everybody likes to just sing easy stuff, and when you add sharps and flats, it just gets crazy. So when you had, even when you have a scale, there's notes that go to others. So this, we were talking earlier about the tonic going to, or the dominant going to the tonic. It's that kind of pull. The goal of atonal music was to get rid of that, give every single note equal importance. All right. Kind of jumping around a little bit because we talked about Bartók earlier. We're going to talk about him again. So, what were the influence of Bartók's style?
Hungarian was the strongest, but he fused folk, classical, and 20th century sounds.
Yep. So she's absolutely right. Hungarian folk tunes were absolutely the biggest influence. But Bartók was also using classical forms and 20th century sounds. He also used powerful beats, unexpected accents, and changing meters. Yep. So Bartók's influences were Hungarian folk music, classical forms and structures, 20th century sounds, powerful beats, unexpected accents, and changing meters. So, which of Bartók's compositions were compared to Beethoven's? His string quartets. Mm-hmm. Does everybody remember Beethoven's string quartets? They were like the height of music ability. It was just like,
They were Nirvana.
basically they were Nirvana for the time period. So why are Bartók's compared to Beethoven's?
Considered finest since his that's all it said in the book.
Okay,
It's considered
so
finest.
yeah, no, I mean they're very good. The string quartets are very good. Why were Beethoven's string quartets so popular and so wonderful? They were really expressive. They were moody. Like they just had all these emotions. Did anybody listen to his late string quartets? Oh gosh, guys, you gotta do it. His last string quartet is just beautiful. why Bartoks were compared with because of the high level of expression and expressiveness. All right. Who was the leading American composer and conductor of band music?
John Philip Sousa.
Sousa. Sousa. John Philip Sousa.
How was supposed to see this?
S-O-U-S-A. What was he known as?
Cello player.
I'm talking about more, what did he write a lot of? Patriotic music, specifically marches. He was the March King. So, that was his stuff. It was big. Let's see. What were some of the influences on Charles Ives' music?
Revival hymns.
Hymns. Yep.
Ragtime, village bands, church choirs, patriotic songs, and barn dances.
Yep.
What?
All of that. All right. So basically what you have to know is that it was deeply rooted in folk and popular music that he knew. So that included hymns, ragtime, village bands, church choirs, patriotic songs, and barn dances. So it's kind of funny, if you think about it, those are a lot of the songs that even we know today. That's where they're coming from. What was Gershwin's first big hit? Swanee. Spelled S-W-A-N-E-E. He had a very musical family. So who was George Gershwin's lyricist?
Ira.
His brother Ira. Mm-hmm.
Bet it came from Africa.
So, not true actually. So, what the theme used in Still's Afro-American Symphony came from where?
Blues and spirituals.
Blues and spirituals. Was it written by anyone? Nope. It was written by him. He devised his own blues spiritual theme, which was then used throughout his symphony.
And those were sung by the blacks, right? It's like what I work in stuff. And you kind of took that in.
Spirituals?
Yeah.
Spirituals, yes, were typically sung by African American slaves as they worked. So if you think of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, that would be one of them. In fact, who did that inspire?
It was from Africa.
Hmm?
Wasn't it like Dvorak or something?
Dvorak. Yeah, close. Dvorak. That's right. All right. What were some of the elements of Copland's music, Aaron Copland?
He started in jazz, and then he got American folklore, hymns, kettle
Hymns.
songs, and folk songs.
Yep. That one's tough. Hymns, yep. Hymns and hymnals, yep. Yeah, he was really inspired by cowboy music, which was kind of fun.
Could you repeat those, please?
Sure. Let's see. Elements of Copland's music: jazz, folklore, hymns, cowboy music, and folk tunes. What was the original intent of Copland's Appalachian Spring? It was originally supposed to be a ballet score.
For Martha Graham. Graham.
Yes. Yes. anyone is interested in hearing Appalachian Spring, it's actually being done in it's 11-piece orchestra setting in the spring. It's set for April 11th. It's a good watch because you actually would be surprised at how much it has impacted music, and you also would probably be surprised to hear how much of it you know.
Is it going to be a ballet?
No, it's actually just it's gonna be a 12-piece arrangement. Yeah. One of our conducting students is doing it in the spring for his final, so it's gonna be really interesting. Let's see. Let's move on. What was Ginastera's birthplace?
Buenos Aires.
Argentina. Yeah, you pretty much just need to know Argentina. What is the setting and what are the characteristics of the Estancia Suite?
It was an Argentina ranch,
Mm-hmm.
and it had national flavor and musical idioms.
Yep.
4 movements.
Set on an Argentinian ranch and contains musical idioms. That's absolutely right. Musical idioms? Mm-hmm. So a musical idiom is something representing something else. In this instance, it was with the gaucho, or the horseman of the plains. Hmm?
Yeah, it's Spanish for cowboys.
Yeah, basically. John Adams believed that what styles should be used by modern composers?
Everything.
All styles. Yep. So Adams believed, you don't have to know this, but I'm going to go ahead and just say it for you guys. Adams believed, or believes, he's still alive, John Adams is, he believes that the contemporary composer can follow the examples of Bach, Mahler, and Stravinsky, and be someone who just reached out and grabbed everything, and through musical technique and spiritual vision, turn it into something great. So he's drawing on inspiration from everywhere, and he really believes that modern composers can do the exact same. What were some characteristics of minimalist music?
Steady pulse, clear tonality, and insistent repetition of short melodic patterns.
Yes. It was a very steady pulse. In fact, let's see.
And repetition of short melodic patterns.
Yep. Has anyone ever listened to a minimalist piece?
Probably. I wouldn't recommend it.
So I have a good example here. Oh, please load. Steady pulse. Repetitive. And it's pretty sounding, isn't it? You don't think so? Fun fact, I played that piece. It's over an hour long. And it's pretty much that same thing throughout. It's actually really beautiful. If you'd like to know the name of it or any more about it, go ahead and just talk to me. I took a whole class devoted to minimalist music, so I've got it down. All right. For what is Ellen known for?
She was a female American composer, and in '83 she won a Pulitzer Prize.
Pulitzer. Yep, she won a Pulitzer in music.
Yeah, I didn't even know you could do that
Until this.
Class.
Yeah, it's actually great. There's been quite a few pretty great composers who have won the Pulitzer in music.
When did she win that?
1983? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. current status of jazz in the U.S.?
Some art music.
Yep. It's known as American art music. And it also is called America's classical music. Who was the composer of Memphis Blues and St. Louis Blues?
W.C. Handy.
W.C. Handy. So it kind of, those works kind of allowed the crystallization of blues at the time in both its poetic and musical forms. What are some characteristics of blues music? We talked a little bit about it earlier. How many bars?
12.
12 bars, 12 bar harmony.
So far that I got. So
Yeah, no, that's good. So, yeah, 12 bar blues. Could it be, was it sung? Was it played by instruments? Both, yep. Was it happy, sad? Both. Who is known as the Empress of the Blues?
Bessie Smith.
Bessie Smith. Bessie Smith, whoa.
Whoa.
Who is the most important composer, arranger, and conductor of the swing era?
Duke Ellington.
Yeah, Duke Ellington. What are some characteristics of free jazz?
Improvisation.
Yep.
What was it?
Improvisation. So it wasn't based on regular forms or established chord patterns. So it wasn't like the blues where it's like you gotta follow this chord progression. It was free. What kind of music did we talk about in class that it was kind of related to, in the sense that it was really free? Chance music. So you can say that it could be compared to chance music. Who was Charlie Parker?
He's a blues guy, wasn't he? Or jazz. He's the father of jazz or something like that.
So he actually was more a figure in the bebop scene.
So the father of bebop.
I would really be hard pressed to kind of name
Inventor?
one person as like a founder or father of any of these movements. And it's because, as you guys talked about in class, it was really like everything was changing at the time. I mean, people were coming in and doing new things, and it was all being experimented with and questioned. And no one person was really responsible for any of that.
So we just need to put the piece.
You can put that he played alto sax, and that he was a towering figure among bebop musicians.
Among who? Bebop musicians.
Bebop musicians. What are some characteristics of cool jazz?
Smoother.
It's cool, man.
Yes.
So cool. It's what everyone loves to do at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, is talk about how cool jazz is. All right. I'm the only one that does that. that typical jazz scene that you think of. Everybody's lounging in a jazz club, drinking their cocktails and being like, yeah, exactly. Some other features of it, it was typically longer. These pieces were a lot longer. The idea was really that you could just kind of sit back, relax, and listen to this music for a long period of time. Because of that, it wasn't as improvised necessarily as some other forms of jazz. It usually was arranged. So an arrangement means that there's kind of a structure, a general structure that everyone then follows. It's usually even printed, unless you're really good, in which case then you don't need that paper anymore. But it was typically arranged for an ensemble.
There's a leader, right? There's a leader of the band, and he would point to guys to do
Sometimes. It just depends on the ensemble. Sometimes you might have a jazz leader who comes in and leads. That sometimes might be the lead trumpet player, the lead saxophonist, somebody who can kind of put their instrument down for a second and then lead others. But typically an ensemble was able to communicate that without needing a leader.
Was that the one big on solo pieces?
A lot of these are big on solo pieces, so it's really hard to say. Really what you just need to know for cool jazz is that it was calm, relaxed, it was usually longer, and it relied more heavily on arrangements. It was also one of the only types of jazz to incorporate non-traditional jazz instruments like the cello and the French horn, the flute. So if you guys are asked what style of jazz used non-traditional jazz instruments, it would be cool jazz. Who was a key contributor to cool jazz and fusion, or jazz rock? Big guy, Miles Davis. Oh yeah, that guy, that big guy.
What is his name?
Miles Davis. He was continually innovative in multiple styles. So he had contributions in cool jazz as well as fusion jazz rock. On to something completely different. What are some elements of a musical?
dancing, singing, talking.
Yeah. What's it kind of like in musical history? Opera. It's a lot like opera. Yeah. No, ballet was a good guess because there's the dancing and there's also instruments, so that's a really good guess, but it was a lot more like opera. So that was correct. So there were elements of theater, music, dancing, singing, and then of course a large stage. Let's talk about Bernstein. Who were some of the main influences of Bernstein's music? Stravinsky and Copland. Yep. Has everybody seen West Side Story? Oh my gosh, you guys! It's a classic!
I saw a clip.
You saw it? I saw a clip. I'm basically pro.
Yeah.
All right. Well, has everyone read Romeo and Juliet?
Yes.
Good. A little bit. No, you guys are killing me. All right. Well, West Side Story was kind of a modern day Romeo and Juliet. You had, the female love interest, and then also the bad boy. So.
Gang war.
Exactly. Gang war, all of that. People get killed. It's bad news. All right. Who was the lyricist for Bernstein's West Side Story?
Stephen Sondheim.
Stephen Sondheim.
How do you spell his last name?
Sondheim. he has written a ton of music. He wrote the music, I believe he did Into the Woods, which is about to be released. In fact, what's really cool is Stephen Sondheim is still alive, and when he was working in the production for Into the Woods, he's actually modifying it from its original. So it's kind of interesting. It's really nice to be able to look at that and say, this was something that was written forever ago and is now still being edited and revised. What are some sources of movie music?
They can borrow or like create their
Commission
own.
it.
Or
Yep, so they can commission it and create their own. In fact, that's typically how it goes. But also, they draw a lot of inspiration from other compositions. Typically the big works, so like they draw inspiration from like Mahler and Wagner. So, I mean, if you think of that really dramatic movie music that we see in like Lord of the Rings or any of the Avengers, that kind of thing, all of that really intense, or even Star Wars. Star Wars is like hugely based on, I think it's Mahler. I'm pretty sure it's Mahler. Don't quote me, but I'm like 99.9% sure that it's Mahler. But yeah, it's really cool. I love movie music. And what's great about movie music is that it kind of delves back in history in a couple ways. It uses a kind of a modern leitmotif. And what's an example of that?
Jazz.
Jaws, exactly. Can everybody sing it? Da-dum, da-dum. Wagner, second.
Carnage, blood.
It's tension. I couldn't do it. All right. What is the first big hit of the new rock style?
Rock around the clock.
Rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock. Yeah. Let's see. What were some exploratory techniques used by the Beatles?
Drugs.
Absolutely. Not recommended, but yeah. that was happening at the time. So, how about musical influences? Musical.
They grabbed some South American tunes.
They did. So they not necessarily. Where did you say?
I said South. Was it Central America?
Well, they were using a bunch of just mainly non-Western scales, harmonies, chords, rhythms. They also used electronics. When I see this, I just think of like the entire Norwegian wood, like it's big time into this like experimental. A lot of their later stuff. What are melodic characteristics of rock music?
Simple.
Very simple, very repetitive. Yep. Typically built on modes, so not typically built on a scale, usually some kind of form of a scale called a mode. What is the instrument that created the modern rock sound?
Electric guitar.
The electric guitar. All right. So these definitions, I'm pretty sure are probably all in your book.
Okay.
So what I'm going to go ahead and do is leave this last 10 minutes for if you have any questions about anything specifically. Does anyone have anything that they can think of right now? All right.
Oh, yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
So for the exam, would we be expected to just write a little short answer about the definition?
No. There's no writing.
Is she doing all multiple choice for this one?
And
Almost.
matching.
Yeah, all
Listen.
Yeah, you have to write the listenings, but
That's great.
So
I love it.
because I graded the last test, I beg of you to still do the these definitions really well because the matching and the definitions were what really hit a lot of people last time. So please, 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 please take these definitions seriously. All right, thanks guys.
Thanks, Connie.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I showed it a little late.